Hey everybody, Randy Hayes here coming at you with another fun-filled quick tip for Power App design. In this quick tip video, I will show you how to get alternating row colors in your gallery without the use of collections, variables, or any other actions. Seems like a fairly simple thing that should be part of Power Apps, but it's not, and I'm going to show you how to do it right now. But before we jump in, don't forget to click on the subscribe button and the like button so that you get notified of upcoming videos with these type of quick tips. And feel free to leave comments down below too. So let's get to it. So in this quick tip, we're going to do what I hear often requested, which is how to do alternating colors on rows in a gallery. So there's a variety of different ways to do it, but I'm going to show you one that I think is pretty simple and pretty easy to work with. So in this case, we've got an app here and we've put a gallery on it, did a little bit of styling to make it a little colorful so that we can see it better. And we've connected to a SharePoint data source here, and it's called Project Samples. And it's just a little sample list with a couple things in it. It's not really important. It could be any data source in this case. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come through and change this items property. And we're going to do something with it, which will let us create individual order rows for it that we can use for our coloring. When you're doing alternating row shading in a gallery, you're typically doing that off of a row number, and you use a math formula that lets you tell you if it's odd or even, and based on that you can then color that particular row. So we don't really have that, or we don't really have anything we can rely on in this case. I mean, obviously with SharePoint we have an ID column, which is typically sequential, but we can't guarantee that that's the case. And so if we try to use it as our coloring agent, if you will, it will cause issues and maybe our gallery may not look exactly as we want. We want to have a completely sequential set of row numbers for everything that's in our gallery, regardless of how we actually do it. If we sort it differently, if we may filter it differently, any of those types of things, we want that to be a set of sequential row numbers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come through and we're going to force this to have row numbers. We'll come in here then and we're going to go ahead and put in a with statement because I really like the with statement. It lets me separate out different components of my formula, and that way I can reference back to it and I don't have to constantly be putting in the same formula over and over again. So actually we don't need this anymore because this is going to be record, and actually I'll call this records because it should be really plural just to make it right. So we're going to incorporate a ForAll statement in here. Now I see people use ForAll often to try to do loops and things like that, and it's kind of lost in the mix, but ForAll actually returns a table of values based on what it is that you're actually doing ForAll against. So in this case we're going to do a ForAll and we're going to use the sequence function. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to count rows on the number of rows that's in our records. So very simple. If we have 10 records in Project Sample, this is going to be a sequence of 10. So we're going to have that itself is going to be a table of values from 1 through 10. So the next thing that we'll do here is actually then determine what our record that is going to be returned from the ForAll is going to look like. So what we're going to do is we're going to get last of the first n of our records based on the value of the sequence. So what does this mean? So take it from the beginning here, or inside I should say. We have records, which we already know what that is. But what first n does is it actually will give us back the first n number of records, and n is defined here in this value. So if I said first n records 1, this first n is going to return 1 record. If I said first n records 2, then first n is going to return the first 2 records. and so on. So if I keep going up, I'll get 3 records and 4 records and 5. What we're going to do then is we're going to just take that and feed that into a last function, and last is going to give us the last of those records. So if we said first n records 1 and we said the last of that, we'll get record 1. If we said first n records 2 and we took the last of that, we'd get the second. First n records 3 and took the last of that, we would be getting record 3. And so on. So all of these are going to return us as we sequence through this number. Again, remember we said maybe we have 10 records in our project sample, so this will be a sequence of 10. And this value comes from sequence, so that's where it gets that number. So first part of it in this ForAll, it's going to be 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and so forth. So we're going to get all of those different records. So that's good. And in fact, if we were actually to take this at this point and go back to here, you'll see from our gallery perspective, it is exactly the same. We are doing the exact same thing. But what we really need to do is we need to get that sequence number. So how we're going to do that is we're going to essentially add a column to our information. Now, rather than using add column, because add column is not really going to work well in this context, we would have to either add the column here as part of this records or something. I find it just easier. We'll just use a patch statement. And patch is, again, one of those things that everybody thinks patch is for patching a data source, but it's actually not just for that. It's also used to put records together. So in this case, I'm saying I want to patch whatever the record is that comes from out of here in our project samples, and I'm going to patch it with another column that I'm going to call row number. We'll just say row number. And I want the row number to be the value of whatever is in this sequence. So now we have the row number. It's going to be part of that. So if you look back here at our gallery again, you see that the gallery actually has everything still coming back in. We have all of our record information. Nothing's changed there. And we'll go ahead and throw in a label here real quick. And I'm going to change this to that row number that we just created. And so now you can see in here that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everything is exactly as it was. What's significant about this is that not only are we getting that, but as I mentioned before, it doesn't really matter in what order this information is coming in. So you notice this is not sorted alphabetically. If we were to sort this alphabetically, so we'll say sort by columns, and I'm going to take the title column, because that's what we're showing right here. We're just going to sort it by the title column. So now if we take a look here, you'll notice it's all sorted alphabetically, and our row number continues to be the same. So now how to use this? The way that we would use this then is we would go into our gallery into the TemplateFill. And in here we can change this formula in the TemplateFill and add in our different color. Before I do that, I'm going to show you how the math of this works. So if we go through here, I'm going to copy this label over just so that you can see. And we're going to be using a function called mod. So we're going to do a mod function, and this gives us the modulus of a number divided by something. So it's going to return the remainder of a division. So in this case, we're going to take the row number and we're going to divide it by 2 because we want every other column to be there. So you can see here that we're actually getting odd rows, we're getting a 1, and for even rows, we're getting a 0. So we can use this now into our TemplateFill. So let's come in here and we'll say if this item dot row number, and that's the one we want, and we want to do that mod formula in here. So we'll say this item dot row number with a divisor of 2. If that has a remainder of 0, then we want this row to be, let's just say, light blue. And then if it's not, then we'll just keep it at transparent here. So now you see we have this list here is all alternating color coded, and we have this all based off of that simple function that we put into our items property. So again, the significance of this is that that row number is always going to be sequential, regardless of what we do in our actual filter here. So even if we were to come through here and say, let's filter this project examples, and we'll just say ID is greater than 3. I don't know, we'll just make something up. Non-delegable, of course, that's okay. And we see here that, again, everything is color-coded in our alternating rows exactly as we expected. So it really doesn't matter what we change up in here for our record source, as long as we use this to generate the row number to go with it. And so now we can come through here, and now that we have that, let's actually just put this back the way it was. Because the only other things to mention here, this tip is pretty much done, but the only things to mention here are situations where you still want to have some other template fill. So what I would do in that case is I would just break out this if statement a little bit more. So maybe you had some sort of logic where you were going to highlight rows by other types of values. Just put that before this in your formula. So let's just say if this item.id is greater than 4, then we want the rows to be highlighted with red. Otherwise, we want the original formula that we're using to come into play. And actually, let's just clear that up a little bit. So now you can see that anytime we go over 4, those become red. So you can still use all your other color coding and other types of things that you want to do in here, while at the same time maintaining your alternate row style. You can even use this in a sense of putting in different color fades and things like that to alternate, but I'll leave that up to you to do. The only one caution that you have to remember with this is when it comes into using an edit form based on this gallery. As with any gallery, when you are changing the signature of the items, and in this case, we're adding a column to our record. So if you're going to do something like you're going to have an edit form, for example, and you want that data source to be project samples, let's just say that's fine, and we'll just leave this here. And this is very typical that you say, okay, I want the item of that to be gallery1.selected. So that's the one we want to edit, and you're going to get an error. And the reason is because that expects that it's going to have the same signature as what is in here, and it doesn't, because we've added that extra column into the gallery. So there's a couple ways around it. One is that you could actually just do a lookup. You could say lookup on our project samples, and we can say ID equals gallery1.selected ID. And this is probably by far the easiest one to do, because this will just, it's pretty simple. It's not much to it. If you didn't want to do that, you could also use a combination of getting the first record of trying to drop those columns. That one is a little messier, because in this case, we're going to go through and say that we don't want it based on selected. What we have to do in this case is we have to turn that selected into a table. And then we're going to, on that, we're going to drop columns from table, and we're going to drop the row number. And then, because that is an entire table, what we need to do is we need to take the first one of those that gets returned. Okay, so that's a little messier, but it works as well. And what we're doing is we're taking the record, turning it into a table, using the drop columns on it because it needs to be a table that it works on, and then taking the first result. So we're really only dealing with one record, but we turned it to a table and then take the first one. And that gives us the same concept. And you can see here, if we picked a different one, our edit form would change accordingly. So everything works as expected. I hope you can use this tip in your app today. Happy power apping!